I'm drawing the line at Boxing Wursel. If you don't know that reference, don't worry about it, but it does explain what we're going to see today on the PC Engine Files. I'm your host, Mr. MegaManFan, and this is Bullfight, Ring no Haja. But that's not bullfighting, that's boxing, baby. This is professional boxing through the ranks of the Japanese leagues, rising up as an underdog to become the champion of the world. You have 8 different fighters to select from, but unfortunately, there's not going to be much difference in how any of the 8 of them play, because you are controlling the action from the side. Yes, unlike Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, where you can dodge to the left and the right to avoid your opponent's blows and throw uppercuts, combos, knockouts, body shots, you can't do anything here but march forward and march backward. You can occasionally put your hands up to block a shot, but I find that to be terribly ineffective. You can occasionally knock your opponent backward with a well-timed jab, but that seems to happen more rarely than not in my experience. Now, I'm told there is an alternate mode to this game where you go through a vigilante-style beat-em-up mission, acquiring money and equipment along the way, but the boxing is so bad, I can't imagine I would want to do it as a beat-em-up side-scroller either, so I'm not even going to investigate that part, because my feeling is if I can't even win a single boxing match in Bullfight Ring no Haja, what's the point of any of the other modes of this game? And right now, I am getting my ass handed to me by this Hulk Hogan lookalike, complete with golden blonde hair, balding head, and bulging muscles. If he's not supposed to be Hulk Hogan, he's a damn good imitation of him. And presumably, they were basing some of this off the Rocky movie anyway, so I can imagine Thunder Lips would be a very popular choice for a game like this. And there, I get dropped to the canvas for a second time, and this time, no matter how hard I mashed the buttons, I was unable to recover. Now, if you're looking for a copy of Bullfight for your TurboGrafx or PC Engine collection, it is not a super expensive game. You can get a loose hue card for only $9.95 with free shipping. A quote-unquote sealed version can be had for $20, and other various copies go anywhere from $12 to $50, depending on what kind of condition you want it in. But you can get it for as low as $5.59 with $2.80 shipping if you want to wait a month because it had come all the way from Spain. Unless, of course, you live in the European territory, in which case maybe the shipping wouldn't take nearly so long. But either way, if you're playing this game in emulation, you might see that it's not worth it no matter how short nor how long that would take. I don't have a thing against boxing games. I have a thing against bad boxing games. And I'm sorry to compare it to Tyson's Punch-Out because maybe that's too high a bar to set, but it really is the gold standard for all the games before and since. Even Super Punch-Out and Punch-Out on the Wii, there's that feeling that you get that you can actually control what you're doing when you're able to dodge, jab, dodge, uppercut, dodge, body blow, when you can strategically move in multiple directions and throw multiple different kinds of punches, and you can learn to read your opponent's tells for when they're open for a perfect shot. There's no doing that in Bullfight. I think this would be better if it was bullfighting. At least then I could be like, Toro, Toro, okay, Toro, and he'd charge and I'd wave the red flag like Bugs Bunny. No, none of that here. At least they are trying to offer some options because not only do you have these 8 different boxers, you also have 8 different managers, and there are even a couple of women in there, which is probably somewhat progressive for the time, but it doesn't seem to matter what your manager is because you're still crippled by having only 2 types of punches, this straight up jab and occasionally a body blow, and then you just get knocked backwards the whole time anyway, so what does it even matter? I think maybe by holding left and pushing one of the buttons, I might be throwing an uppercut. It never lands. I don't know what the point of it is. I only land the jab and the body blow, and that's it. And I can't block for shit. I will admit there's probably a learning curve to this where I could get good at it over time, but it's really telling when you can find one particular move that works, and if you just repeat it ad nauseum, you do better than if you're actually trying. Also, the fact that there's no actual animation of you getting knocked down, and then they just show you down on your face on the canvas is pretty lazy if you ask me. They couldn't even animate you falling over. They put that little effort into it. It seems to me there's probably a good reason Bullfight Ring no Haja is not a super expensive PC Engine game. It's not a highly desirable PC Engine game. And maybe I'm speaking to the one fan out there who really likes this game, but bless you, because I was just happy to knock down my opponent once, and then he gets right back up at 6. I have to struggle to get up barely before the count of 10, and the computer AI is like, nope, getting right off the canvas. And that's where I'm like, yeah, I don't know about this one. I think it's a budget title for a reason, so I am not putting Bullfight Ring no Haja on my recommended list for the PC Engine files, but I do appreciate you being here to watch the video and listen to me talk about Bullfight Ring no Haja. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. I'll see you next time. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is the PC Engine Files, and you are looking at Galaga 88. If you were ever wondering what came after Galaxian, Galaga, and G+, now you know. Although the name itself is a little misleading because Galaga 88 was actually released in the arcade in 1987, and to make matters even more confusing, when it was released for the TurboGrafx in North America, they changed the name from Galaga 88 to Galaga 90. So now you have multiple different names for the same game, and it gets worse from there because in Europe they retitled this game Galaga 2. Holy crap, that's creating confusion all over the map. But at least when it comes to this game, there aren't that many ways to play it, so there isn't more confusion on top of that. You've got your Game Gear version, your TurboGrafx version, your arcade version, and a few Namco Museum compilations include this game as well, and that's about it, making it one of the more obscure Galaga games out of the entire series, which is rather unfortunate because this has always been one of my personal favorite Galaga games. When I got a TurboGrafx 16 back in the day, I specifically went out of my way to get this game first among all the games that I wanted because I have always been such a huge fan of Galaga games in general, and this one in particular because of the extra features that are included in the game. For example, you just noticed that not only did I start with a double ship, but I captured my own ship to create a triple ship with a triple shot, which is incredibly powerful and fun to use. And you also have these capsules that will appear from certain oversized enemies when they combine together and swoop down, or you can blow up asteroids and find the capsules inside. When you collect enough of the capsules and you complete a galactic dancing stage like this one, the capsules will open up a portal that enables you to warp further ahead in the game. Basically, it's a warp pipe level skip from the Super Mario Brothers series. You go to World 401, so to speak, but it's Galaga's version of that. So you don't have to use the capsules, you don't have to use the warps, but if you want the adventure, that option is there for you. Just like you don't have to start out with a double ship, just like you don't have to get a ship captured and create a triple ship. These are all variants in the way that you play Galaga 88. That's what makes this so much fun to play, besides the fact that the alien waves are really exciting. Not to say that they aren't in other versions of Galaga, but I feel like Galaga 88 absolutely nails it. They're bright, they're colorful, they move very fast, they're fun to shoot down as they swoop in, they're fun to shoot down when they're in the wave formation, waving back and forth left and right as you knock them down. There's just all sorts of frantic shoot 'em up action here. You know, I at first didn't even want to use the term shoot 'em up because that usually implies that you're moving, and here you're just a ship on a single screen. But once you take the warp, which you're going to see here in a second when I complete a Galactic Dancing, you actually are playing a shoot 'em up because you are scrolling from one wave of enemies to the next, and when you complete all of those waves, you actually have a boss that you have to fight. This is combining Galaga with the elements of shoot 'em ups that you know and love and creating something new and altogether different that really innovated the Galaga series. So again, I have to state my disappointment that this was considered, quote, a commercial failure, unquote, on the Wikipedia entry for the game. How did people not get into Galaga 88 when it was released in the arcade? And why didn't this get more ports to home consoles, home computers, portable systems, you name it? I'm baffled. It's like there was a huge opportunity missed here. I don't know if Namco just didn't believe in it themselves, but if they didn't believe in it, then why did they make it in the first place? It defies logic that you would spend the time and money to develop a great Galaga game and then go, it's not going to do that well, so we'll just release it in arcades and cut our losses. It's a tax write-off. What? Who actually thinks that way? Who looks at this game and goes, this isn't as fun or addictive as we thought it would be, so fuck it. I just don't get the thinking. But maybe that's why I'm a retro gamer and not a business executive working for Namco. Or as it says at the beginning title screen, Namcot. Which is one of the reasons I decided to play Galaga 88 today on the PC Engine files. I wanted to see just how many differences there were from the TurboGrafx 16 game that I love and play so frequently, and yet the Japanese version existed long before it was ported to North America, so I thought if there are any significant differences, maybe I'll pick up on them while I'm playing it for the channel for all of you who watch this show every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And in summary, here are the differences that I found. The title screen is different, the company logo is different, that's it. I see no other differences. The waves don't seem to be different. The points you score when you shoot them don't seem to be different. The overall warping and point scoring for extra lives, exactly the same. Even the way the asteroids move when you do the dimension warp seems to be 100% the same. So if they made any tweaks, even relatively minor ones, I'm not picking up on them. I'm not saying that lightly because I play Galaga quite a bit. Not just on my original TurboGrafx 16, but I play this in emulation. I play this on my unmodded Sony PSP that still has System 1.5 on there. Yeah, I actually bought a PSP and never updated it once with any of the firmware, so I can use the jailbreak to play emulation on there. I play Galaga 90 on there quite a bit. So for me, I would almost certainly notice any differences, and I have not found a one while I'm playing this for the channel for all of you. So in conclusion, whether you play Galaga 88 or Galaga 90, it's going to be the same game. Japan version, North American version, same game. So if you have a Hue card converter and you want to save a little money, the Japanese version might be a way to go. But then again, given the commercial failure, quote unquote, again, Wikipedia says it was a failure, maybe it's not going to be a cheap game either way, in which case, play it on an EverDrive, play it on emulation, but whatever you do, for the love of all that's out there right now, play Galaga 88. Galaga 90, Galaga 2, whatever it's called where you live, just play it. It is one of the all-time best Galaga games. I cannot recommend it more highly, and I thank you very much for watching this edition of the PC Engine Files. Like, share, comment, subscribe if you're not a subscriber. You know all those things that YouTubers always ask you to do. And if you already are a subscriber or like and comment, then my gratitude to you for participating in this channel and helping it grow. That's all I can ask for is your participation, and for that I will continue to make you content each and every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, as well as daily content, 8 p.m. every single day. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Welcome back to the PC Engine Files. Today we're looking at Hana Taka Daka, released August 9th, 1991 by Taito for the PC Engine in the HuCard format. Now, how many of you out there remember the animated show Drawn Together, which ran on Comedy Central for 3 years in the 2000s? The reason I bring it up is because the lead character of this game is a Tengu, which is referred to in some translations of the game's title from Japanese to English as a long-nosed goblin. But when I look at it, I don't think long-nosed goblin. I think Wuldor Jebediah Sockbat. The yellow body, the gigantic red nose, the fact that he's flying around. If this isn't Wuldor Sockbat, I don't know who is. In fact, if Drawn Together had based the character on this PC Engine game, I wouldn't have been the least bit surprised, because the show already had a parody of Link from The Legend of Zelda named Xander. So that was part of the reason I enjoyed Drawn Together so much, was it spoofed pop culture and video games, and the characters were voiced by absolutely brilliant voiceover artists like Cree Summer, Tara Strong, Adam Carolla. They all did a fantastic job. Sadly, that show only lasted for 3 seasons, but my good friend Ryan used to have Spanky Ham as his avatar online, so it was one of the things that always amused me. Was every time I looked and saw his profile and saw Spanky Ham, it just made me smile. I would even send him clips of various things that Spanky Ham had done on the show that always cracked me up. But getting back to this game, Hana Taka Daka is quote-unquote very Japanese in its presentation. That little introduction sequence you saw as I was telling you some of the historical facts about this game, that explains the plot, but unfortunately it doesn't explain it well enough, especially if you're not familiar with Japanese folklore. What's going on are these 2 kitsune, their names are Kanta and Inari. You can think of them as foxes, and they get in trouble with a gang of tanuki, which you can think of as raccoons. And if that name sounds familiar, yes, the tanuki suit from Super Mario Bros. 3 was based on the mythical tanuki in Japan. So these foxes get in trouble with these raccoons, and one of them gets kidnapped, and the other one goes to the local temple and prays to the Tengu for help. And the Tengu is there in the temple and is like, okay, I'll save the day. I'll rescue this kitsune that got kidnapped for you. And then the game begins, and all that exposition is basically just to set up a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up that has branching paths, power-ups, and a lot of action. I find this game way more addictive than I could have possibly predicted when I started. Shoot-'em-ups vary wildly in quality. Some of them are really too easy because they're aimed at children. Some of them are really too hard. Despite being cute, they're just ridiculously impossible to play. This one strikes a balance somewhere in the middle. There's a bit of a learning curve when you're starting out because the Tengu isn't very powerful till he gets his first power up. But once you get it and you start stacking up your multiple shots and your shields and your special weapons, and you also have a bomb that you can drop, then the game really takes on a whole nother level of enjoyability. You just have to get past that initial sequence where you're learning how to play it and what to do. And once you've done that, Hana Takadaka becomes one of the most fun cute 'em ups that I have played on the PC Engine. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's comparable to Koryun, not just in terms of its playability, but also in terms of its price point. It's not quite as expensive, but it's certainly not cheap. I can find copies for $95 complete at the lowest, $152 complete in excellent condition, and somewhere in the middle for a loose card. You can get it for $70, you can get it for $60. You're going to pay a pretty penny for this game. It does have a cult following, but maybe not to Koryun's level. In fact, before playing Hana Takadaka, I had never even heard of it, whereas I had seen many different people talk about Koryun over the years, so I guess this is probably not going to do collectors any favors, but as Metal Jesus Rocks always says, with hidden gems, they're not supposed to be hidden. You're supposed to let people know about these games, so if you don't want to pay those kind of prices, play it in emulation. This is one of those kind of games where you're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't want to spend $60 to $150, and at the very least, you should try it before you buy it. If you're going to spend that kind of money, you should know whether or not you're going to fully enjoy what you're putting down that kind of coin for. And in fact, you might even enjoy this more when you know that there are a few extra features that I wasn't showing you in my gameplay footage that I discovered after the fact. One of which is that the Tengu you're controlling actually has a charge shot a la Mega Man in the later games in the series, where if you hold down your firing button and let it go, you fire a much bigger shot, and you can use that to break obstacles that are in your way and clear paths in certain levels. So using the charge shot changes the game completely and makes some areas that are much tougher much easier to complete. There's also a challenge with the seals that you see right here, where there's one hidden seal in every level and 2 seals total. And if you want to get the true ending of the game, you have to collect all 12 seals. If you don't, the seals that you didn't collect block the ending sequence that you get to watch. So that's how you get to actually see it, is by finding all of the seals, the ones that are hidden and the ones that aren't. So there's a challenge beyond just beating each level and beating each boss, and the more you want to go for it, the more rewarding it will be at the end. You also have different levels of weapons, besides the fact that your Tengu gets bigger with certain power-ups, which may seem like it would make you more vulnerable to attacks, but also makes you more powerful when you attack, so you get to choose whether or not you want to be small or big, and whatever size you are, you have different sub-weapons and options, like the shield, which I previously mentioned, some temporary invincibility from a straw cloak, and different weapons that you get to use other than just your standard shooter. The charge shot is obviously the most effective, but you also have spinning tops, a small flock of Karasu Tengu, and the Kamatachi Yokai, which translates literally as sick weasels riding dust devils. This game is so Japanese, it almost defies explanation. So maybe that would be something that blocks certain people from really getting the most out of it. If you don't know Japanese folklore, it might seem too wacky for you. In fact, I have to explain one thing that is not obvious, but maybe you'll pick up on it watching the gameplay. All of the different enemies that you are knocking out as you're shooting them are shape-shifting tanuki. The tanuki aren't just the ones that kidnap the kitsune at the beginning of the game. They are the enemies you are fighting throughout the game. You'll see little tanukis drop out of each enemy that you hit. Just like when you're playing Sonic the Hedgehog and you pop an enemy, a little flicky will drop out of the monster that has been created by Dr. Eggman. He has put one of the flickies inside of a metal shell, And that's basically what the Tanukis are in this. They're like wearing disguises that are hiding the true Tanuki inside. So every enemy is a Tanuki, the bosses are Tanukis, the whole game is Tanukis, and this is Japanese through and through, which I thoroughly enjoy, and I think you will too. Some games are just bad. Not bad meaning good, but bad meaning bad. From the developers of the regrettable life choice known as Idle Hanafuda Fan Club, this is Lady Sword for PC Engine and, if you have the appropriate adapter, TurboGrafx 16. But this game was never released in the United States, and there's several good reasons for that. The first is that Games Express was an unlicensed PC Engine developer. They did what they wanted to do without any approval or input from the developers of the console. The second reason would be their games are remarkably well known for being soft-core cheese. Let's put it the way Mento did in his review for Giant Bomb. He said, and I quote, "So, was this actually a porn game, but with whole stretches of uninspired dungeon crawling to break up the girly pics? This has to be the oddest game I've covered for the system so far, and I recently played one where a magical blue donkey regularly flies in to save your bacon. I really can't recommend Lady Sword." Mento is right. I really can't recommend the Lady Sword either. If you're watching the graphics stutter in the background, that's not my emulator. That's the way the game is designed. If you're listening to long pauses in the audio where it just simply freezes and refuses to play when an animation takes place, that's not my emulator. That's the way the game is designed. It runs just this poorly on actual hardware. And if you don't believe me, hook up your Super SD System 3 or stick a Turbo EverDrive into your TurboGrafx and try this for yourself. But seriously, don't try this for yourself. Lady Sword is garbage. This game is not fun to play. It could have been fun. There's some actual thought to the design here. You're exploring a dungeon using a first-person perspective, and the controls are not completely inoperable. You can rotate easily, move forward regularly, and even without knowing Japanese, I was able to figure out attack and flee from the options on the menu. And there is an English language patch that does exist for Lady Sword, but again, I would not bother with going to that much trouble to play this game because it is repetitive and tedious. These dungeon walls all look the same. The combat is all the same. The game does not auto-map the dungeon as you explore it, so you end up backtracking over the same areas because you can't distinguish one part of the dungeon from the next. It's not any fun. Even if it did auto-map the level for you to show you where you've been and where you're going, I'm not sure that would really make it that much better given the awful graphical design. It is dull. It is lifeless. I have more energy telling you how bad it is than you would have playing this. It is more fun to tell you that Lady Sword is awful than to actually play Lady Sword. And if you're thinking, ooh, adult content in a retro video game, that sounds exciting. Well, maybe you're the same kind of person who thought Custer's Revenge on Atari 2600 was titillating. And if that is your cup of tea, then I say more power to you. But for the very obvious reason that I don't want this video to be taken down, I'm not going to show you any softcore cheese. And for the very fact that this game's only selling point is the softcore cheese, that just says it's a bad game. But that's what Games Express is known for, bad games. They're an unlicensed developer for a reason. Nobody would actually license this shit. Nobody would say, this is a game we want on store shelves for kids to buy, or even for adults to buy. You shouldn't want to play this game. Only play this if you want to experience the very dregs of the PC Engine library. When you feel like hitting the bottom of the barrel, go for a Games Express release and you will never be disappointed. They are always the worst, most abysmal, most unfun, unplayable PC Engine games there are. This one I rate slightly higher than Idle Hanafuda Fan Club, simply for the fact that you can't automatically win every single time. It does actually present some challenge to you in the way that you play, making you fight your way through the dungeons. It doesn't just automatically give you the win the way Idle Hanafuda Fan Club did. But that doesn't make it a good game. It's terrible. You can even hear the audio stuttering during the outro, and that's just the opening credits of the game. It is so bad. Don't play this. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next week with a hopefully better game. Peace out. You ever play a PC Engine game that you really wanted to like and just couldn't do it? I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Welcome back to the PC Engine Files, and today we're looking at Energy. Now, the title alone intrigued me, and I was psyched up to play this. But I should tell you a few things right off the bat. First of all, when you die, you have to go through this entire cutscene all over again. You can't fast forward through it. You can't skip it. You're stuck. The second thing I should tell you is there is a patch. It's made by Cabbage and Onion Zoo, and it adds quality of life improvements like being able to skip through these cutscenes and speed up the dialogue and changing the game from Japanese to English for non-Japanese speakers. But I didn't want to do that for this episode because I feel like I should give you the authentic PC Engine experience that anybody who bought this game back in 1988 would have had. And it was not a great experience. There are so many things that could have been done right. The premise is not so bad. Something horrible has happened. People are being attacked by mutated monsters, and you have to fight your way through various platforming levels to save them. It all seems good in theory, but then in execution, so many things go so wrong. Let's start with this opening level, which forces you to go either to the left or the right. It looks like you could go up or down to avoid these monsters, but you can't. It looks like you could jump on these broken highways to get a better shot at them or get out of the way of them, but you can't. There are no signposts telling you whether you should go to the left or right, so you just have to guess and take your chances. And then when you do, everything scrolls incredibly slowly from one scene to the next. There is no continuous scrolling here. This is like an old school 1980s computer game where computers just were not capable of having a scroll buffer at the top or the sides of the screen, so they would draw in one screen at a time when you went from one screen to the next. And that's really not too far off because, according to Giant Bomb, this was actually based on a computer game from Quasarsoft called Ash. Here's what they said, quote, "Besides the big improvements to graphic and audio quality, the games seem functionally identical." Really? Well, then I guess Ash must not have been that impressive of a computer game, because if this is what they call big improvements to graphics and audio, I'm not impressed. It doesn't look very nice. It certainly doesn't scroll very well. And what you have to do to make any progression is completely obtuse. Finally, I found whoever this is, this girl, this NPC. She's standing in front of a hole, and she has some tedious dialogue that you have to scroll through. Can't fast forward it, can't skip it, gotta read it all. And then, finally, you can jump down the hole. But as you're falling down the hole, she starts talking to you again. How do you stop in mid-air to have the conversation with her as you're falling down the hole? Oh, dear Lord. I wanted to like Energy. I even had some hope when I saw this opening level with these three-eyed fish monster things that looked like they were straight out of an episode of The Simpsons. I was like, okay, now we're getting into some actual action. I can move in more directions than left and right. I can ascend and descend on these ladders. And then I died. And I'm like, oh, for the love of God. I didn't know at the time that I was going to have to sit through all of the cutscenes again, but I quickly found that out. And that ending sequence, when you get a game over, why does the music continue on for an indeterminate amount of time and then stop? It makes no sense. First of all, there should be a death sound when you die. Second of all, when you die, it should just come to a stop, or there should be a funeral dirge to indicate that you died and the game is over. Third of all, no extra lives, just one life and that's it. You've got one life to live. You got one shot. So you better take that chance. You got it. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. Then again, maybe you should miss this shot to blow, because this game is definitely not the opportunity of a lifetime. It's the opportunity to suffer. Well, it's a cheap game. There is some good news here. If you're a PC Engine collector, you can get a complete in-box copy of this game for about $13. It doesn't seem to be in high demand. I found it for $10 plus $3.50 shipping from a variety of sources. So if you want to add to your PC Engine library, it is readily available. And according to Giant Bomb, the requirements to proceed are often inscrutable, but it does have something of a cult following to this day. Perhaps that cult following is why the game did get a localization and improvements. What's funny is that when I went to the Indie Retro News article about that localization, the very scene you just watched is the first screenshot. And as you're jumping down the hole and you get stopped in midair to finish the conversation, the caption on the screen is, "Wahahaha, you fool!" So apparently that person who was directing you down the hole was not helping you in any way whatsoever. And that seems pretty obvious once you start playing through these areas. The controls just are stiff and slow and unresponsive, and dare I say nearly unmanageable in this unpatched version. And what's weird is that you can't leave a room until you clear all the monsters, but once you do clear all the monsters, there are still barriers in your way. And I apologize if this is graphic, but I have no other way to describe it. You have to hump the barriers to make them disappear. You have to just mash into them with your controller. You get right up next to them, push whichever direction they're in, up, down, left, or right. And until you do that, they don't disappear. You just have to keep thrusting into them until they're gone. It's dumb. Everything about this is dumb. These hovering octopus things in midair, I can only shoot them when they come down to my level or when I climb up and fire at them. It doesn't make sense. There are branching paths which should improve the game, but yet there's no indication of which branching path you should take. When you pick up items, there's no way to check your inventory. There's no indication on the screen you even have them. I tried pressing all the buttons on a TurboGrafx controller that would show them to you, and either I don't have it mapped right in emulation, or that button just doesn't exist, and it only calls up the item into existence from your inventory when you actually need to use it. This is something that I'm sure the patch addresses. This is not something I'm sure would make the game any better, but I'm glad a patch exists that addresses it. I wanted to find good things to say about this game. One review that I saw actually compared it to Metroid. And that's an interesting notion, a PC Engine version of Metroid. But Metroid was way more fluid in its movement, way easier to follow paths through to make progression, and apparently there's some backtracking when you get items that makes it Metroid-esque, but how would you even know you need those items? Like this water here. Who knew I would die jumping into it? It didn't look poisonous or acidic. I guess you must need an item to swim. But there was no way of me knowing that. And then I had to think about whether or not I wanted to sit through that whole stupid cutscene again, and I said no. It has been a few weeks now since we had a really good game on the PC Engine files. I think the last one was Hana Takadaka. So I decided that for all of our sakes, it's time to play a classic, something that has stood the test of time, something that even non PC Engine owners will probably be familiar with, either because they bought the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, which came out earlier this year, or they had a TurboGrafx 16 from childhood, or perhaps they played one of the sequels to this game because it spawned a franchise. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. You're looking at Alien Crush from Naxxitsoft. Naxxit being an anagram of Taxon, the publisher of many PC Engine titles, notwithstanding the entire Alien Crush series, which started with Alien Crush, went on to Devil Crush, turned into Dragon's Revenge, and then later, much later, on the Wii Shop channel, became Alien Crush Returns. So there is quite a legacy here, and it all starts with this particular game, where the premise is undeniably simple, but nonetheless highly addictive. It's a pinball game with a very distinctive visual aesthetic. You may remember that in one of the earliest videos for the PC Engine files, we looked at a game created by Sid Mead, well, visually created by Sid Mead, called Terraforming, and it had a very techno-futuristic style, much like all of the things that Sid Mead created, whether they were for sci-fi movies or architecture or art installations. He was very forward-thinking about the way things should look and feel. And this combines some of that aesthetic with what I would call a horror sci-fi movie aesthetic, something akin to Ridley Scott, the Alien movies, the first and the second one in particular. And there's even, I would call it almost a gothic netherworld darkness to it, because we've got a series of very ghoulish, demonic looking monsters here that look like they could have spawned straight from hell. Not from the hell of Spawn, mind you, but spawned from hell. So, when you combine all of these things together, what do you decide to do with all of those different looks and feels? Pinball, of course. I mean, that's the most logical thing to do, right? You make a pinball game out of it. Truly, somebody at Naxxitsoft, or should I say Taxon, was really smoking the good stuff. I don't know why or how they thought, let's make an H.P. Lovecraft pinball game that looks like a cross between Sid Mead, Ridley Scott, and hell. But they did it, and it is incredibly addictive to play. Now, to give you the best possible opportunity to understand what's going on here, I'm playing it in slow mode, which I'm sure is not preferable to a lot of the hardcore fans of this series, but the fact that you can choose between slow and fast is a mark in the game's favor, in my opinion, because it enables beginners to figure out what's going on and adapt themselves to the gameplay. And then when you become more experienced, you can switch over to the fast play, or perhaps the normal setting, if you will. But whatever your experience level is, or how much you enjoy pinball games, it doesn't matter really whether you go slow or fast. You still have to complete all the goals in all the different sections. There are bonus areas like this one, where these demonic looking Slimer things are protected by shields. So you have to knock out their shields, then you have to hit them enough times to knock them out. And if you do all of this without losing your ball between the middle of the flippers, then you get a nice big points bonus to reward you for your skill in shooting the targets. And to show you you're making progress towards that goal, they change color, they change facial expressions, and eventually they explode in a giant fireball, leading to the end of the bonus stage and the awarding of all of your bonus points, including the extra bonus for completing it perfectly. Sort of like Galaga in that respect, you get a perfect bonus if you do everything right in the bonus area. But you don't have to do it perfectly, you'll still get bonus points even if you lose your ball. Just like when you lose your ball on the main table, you'll get bonus points based on how many of the targets you've hit and how many times you've increased the multiplier by hitting the selected targets that go around it. So there is a lot of diversity to the gameplay. There are multiple bonus stages to play. There are multiple targets to hit. There are multiple ways to aim your ball and go from one screen to the next. And everything in Alien Crush, much like the other games in this series, is destructible. Like your bumpers there at the bottom, they may have just looked like they were static, but they're really not. They're actually like alien larvae with spiders inside. If you hit them enough times, the spiders escape, and you can shoot those for bonuses as well. And there's a skeletal feel to all of this as well. I haven't even mentioned that yet in talking about all of the other things. But you notice how it looks like there's a spine that goes straight up into the mouth of one of the things on the upper half? You see it trailing all the way up the left-hand side, all the way up to the top? I mean, why? How? Did somebody rip it out of someone's back and just slap it into the level? That doesn't make sense. Nor does the fact that there are these eyes that you have to hit in the middle, and the eyes increase the bonus when you shoot it into the mouth of the monster. It's nightmarish. This game should be pure nightmare fuel, and yet it's so just completely over the top in its playstyle and execution that you can't help but enjoy yourself. It's not going to gross you out. It's not going to upset you. You're just going to want to hit all these targets, collect all these bonuses, and destroy all these monsters, and rack up the biggest score and the best performance that you can possibly get each time you play. It draws you in over and over again. It's hard to get enough of this game. Now, for the sake of comparison, I pulled the Japanese ROM because I wanted to know if they changed anything substantial by the time this got ported to North America and released for TurboGrafx 16. So far as I can tell, the music is the same, the graphics are the same, the sound is the same, the scoring is the same. I literally can't tell the difference. Maybe somebody out there knows if there's a difference between the Japanese version and the North American version, but to the naked eye and to the controller in my hand, it feels exactly the same. Let me just go on and add something about this, since I've talked about the play style, I've talked about the addictiveness, but what I haven't told you yet is that this is one of the original TurboGrafx 16 games I got when I first got a TurboGrafx 16. I got the system from a friend of mine through the video game collecting scene, and this is going to sound outrageous when I tell you this, but it's absolutely true, because this was a different era and not the jacked up, inflated 2020 prices that we're all dealing with when I record this video. But when I bought my TurboGrafx 16, I got it for $25. And that's $25 with everything. The console, the controller, the power supply. I think he might have even thrown in the adapter that allows for composite video output instead of RF video output. And that thing alone goes for like $150. Just that adapter by itself. Incidentally, when you decide to use the Super SD System 3, you have to choose between one or the other. You can't have them both plugged into the back. They use the same pin socket. But because the Super SD System 3 has its own video out, it's not even a problem. You plug a Sega Genesis 2 video cable into the back of it, and it's got the composite video output, so you're good to go once you have that. It doesn't require you to have the purpose-made TurboGrafx 16 composite video out adapter. You can get by without it. Maybe I should sell it considering what it goes for. No, I'll keep it just in case I ever take the Super SD System 3 off of it for any reason. I'll want to be able to go back to having composite video out. So no, I won't do that. But the point is, I had already been collecting games for the system even before I had the system, because I had a local game store that had TurboGrafx 16 games on the shelf. And again, don't hate me for saying this, but it's absolutely true. $5 each. Alien Crush was one of the ones I had picked up for $5, and once I had a TurboGrafx 16 of my own, I spent a hell of a lot of time playing that game. Even though I probably had a couple dozen games at that point, I think my entire focus became Alien Crush. And so obsessed was I with playing this game that I actually got a Turbo Express just so I could keep playing it. Even when I wasn't sitting in front of the console, I could play it on a handheld and keep the Alien Crush joy going. Alien Crush led to Devil Crush. Devil Crush led to Dragon's Revenge. Dragon's Revenge, as noted, led to Alien Crush Returns on the Wii. So the legacy of this game is long and storied with me, just as it is for Naxxitsoft, aka Taxon, who deserves all the credit for creating something they might not have had any intention of making a franchise out of, but this unorthodox visual style and this addictive gameplay caught on in a major way with gamers. People throw around the term cult following rather loosely these days, and it doesn't necessarily carry the weight that it really should. Everything that has an audience of a couple 100,000 viewers on TV, somebody says it has a cult following. Well, maybe that's true, but when I say cult following, what I'm telling you is this truly is a cult following, because if you're outside of the realm of TurboGrafx 16 and PC Engine, seeing an Alien Crush game on the Wii Shop was probably completely baffling to you. What even is this? Well, this is what it is. This is where it all started. If you want to start collecting for PC Engine or TurboGrafx, start with this. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and this week on the PC Engine Files, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The good news is that Metal Stoker, aka Metal Stoker Neo Hard-Boiled Shooting, is a really good game. The bad news is it's a really expensive game. A quick glance at the prices on eBay was quite eye-opening. If you want a complete in-box copy, or at least complete in the tray, the gem-style case that HuCards / TurboGrafx 16 / PC Engine games come in, it's not cheap. Lowest I could find, $120. If you want a quote-unquote mint copy, it could be as much as $180 plus $20 shipping. Now, the listings get a little tough because copies of Metal Stoker are few and far between, so you get a lot of unrelated search results that come up for things like Metal Angel and Super Metal Crusher, even one for something called Mad Stalker Full Metal Force. So that should actually be indicative of the rarity of this game, and it's no surprise that it is, because it comes from a relatively obscure developer named Face. And no, not like the old slang term, face, where you put a hand up in front of somebody to basically tell them you don't want to hear it, so shut up already. Not that Face. This Face is a very, very obscure publisher that's not well known for very many things. I can't even think of them off the top of my head, so I'm going to defer to Hardcore Gaming 101, who wrote about this release, and they named the most notable titles that Face did as Money Idol Exchanger and Time Cruise 2. Since I haven't covered either of those yet for the PC Engine files, this is a first for the channel. It's pretty good. It's a cross between Smash TV and a shoot 'em up game and a tank game. If you played any of those old combat style games from the 1970s and 80s where you maneuvered around obstacles and shot at other things, that's what this feels like. But it controls more like a shooter. Except it's not an auto-scrolling shooter. The screen only moves when you move, and unlike most shoot-em-ups, you don't stay centered in the middle of the screen. You're actually maneuvering around every single thing on it. But like shooters, you collect power-ups, which improve the weapons that you can hit the enemies on the screen with. It's very interesting that this game seems to be entirely in English, and yet was never released for TurboGrafx 16. I can't really fathom why, other than the fact that Face was such a small developer that they probably didn't have the budget to put it out outside of Japan. Again, judging by the prices this game goes for, its print run was rather low, the company itself not a huge success in the market, and maybe this is like the lone gem among their titles. Based on the reviews I've seen at various places like the PC Engine Software Bible, the Video Game Den, Hardcore Gaming 101, and so on, it seems this game is fairly well received among PC Engine collectors, which unfortunately would also contribute to the prices this game goes for. It's that perfect storm of a low print run meets a well-reviewed game, results in an expensive title to play for a various console that it comes out on. Sort of like how recently the Cryon Conquest for NES has skyrocketed in value because it's being rediscovered and called a hidden gem, and of course people who never played it back in the day suddenly want a physical copy of it. So now a game that back when I bought it might have been like 10 or 15 bucks is closer to $100 loose, and much more than that if you want a complete copy. And yes, the Cryon Conquest is a good enough game to be rediscovered and played, but it's also a game that it's probably not worth paying $100 for. I would say the same thing about this, like a hardcore collector might just want a physical copy of this game. If you're that person and you have $120 to spare or more, then sure, why not get a copy of Metal Stoker? If you want to spend your money that way, I'm not judging you, because we all spend whatever we want on whatever we like. But for me, it sometimes feels crazy to pay more for a 30-plus-year-old game than something brand new for a modern console, or even for a collector's edition of something. You know, Limited Run Games makes those special packages with the game, poster, a soundtrack, some trinkets, and you could get one of those for less than you would pay for a 30-plus-year-old game like Metal Stoker. But try it. Find a way to try it and play it, because it's got some really great things going for it. I love these boss areas that trap you in one screen and make you defeat all the enemies in that area before you move on to the next part of the stage. I really enjoy that format. It reminds me very much of a game like Shantae, where the same thing happens when you go into certain rooms. The doors lock behind you in either direction, and until you defeat that character, you can't progress. And also, I really dig how the game gets better as you get more experienced. Like, at first you want to be cautious and try to clear each enemy and not take too many hits because you have a limited number before your ship gets exploded. And yet, when you start winging it, when you just hold down the fire button and just try to move through each area, you will realize very quickly that you can fire in multiple directions and quite rapidly, especially if you've been picking up all the power-ups along the way. And then it becomes more freeform. You just kind of wing it and take out enemies and dodge their fire. It becomes more like a bullet hell kind of game. And I dig that. I think Metal Stoker actually deserves its price, even if it's not a price I necessarily want to pay. I feel like, hey, you know what? If I'm gonna spend 120 bucks on something from 30 plus years ago for PC Engine, maybe this would be the one. No, probably not, but I do enjoy playing it on Super SD System 3. I do enjoy playing it in emulation, and I will admit, if you have a physical copy, I might just envy you just a little bit because I think this game deserves to be played by more people, and owning it would be kind of a treat. I, I just don't know that I can justify $120 for it, but I can definitely see why, if you're super into PC Engine games, you couldn't have a collection and have stuff like Sapphire and Rondo of Blood and not also have Metal Stoker. You would want to spend that kind of money to have every part of the PC Engine library, especially the ones that are a little obscure, pretty good, definitely hard to find. And this would be all of those. So, don't know how much more I can add about Metal Stoker that you can't already see from watching me play it. It's fun. It's so much fun that I almost want to just say, stop watching me and go find a copy. How would I find a copy, is what you're asking? Well, I really can't tell you that. I'm just going to tell you DuckDuckGo is your friend. Google, maybe not so much. Archive.org, somewhere in the middle. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. But it's definitely out there. There are definitely places you will be able to locate Metal Stokers so you can experience this tank slash shoot 'em up slash smash TV slash scrolling action game for yourself. And hopefully by watching me play, you've learned what not to do. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again on another episode next week. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and today on the PC Engine Files, we're taking a look at Battle Load Runner, which is an anomaly among PC Engine games, as it became the first Japan-exclusive game to be available on the Wii Virtual Console in April 2007. Now, there's a pretty good reason for that. Battle Load Runner doesn't have any Japanese that would prevent you from playing the game if you're not able to read it. It's all in English. And it is, in fact, an adaptation of a video game series which started in the United States and became hugely popular on personal computers in the 1980s. I'm one of those kids who grew up playing Load Runner on a Commodore 64 computer, loved the ever-loving heck out of it, would play it to death, would edit my own levels, would do so much within the game, with the game, loved the game. Now, Battle Load Runner supports up to 5 players via a multi-tap, but I can't show you that via emulation here, and I'm not sure I could even show you that on the actual TurboGrafx 16 that I have running Super SD System 3. I think I have a multi-tap around here somewhere, but I don't have 5 controllers, so there would just be no way to do it even with the multi-taps. So let's just take it for granted that this was an innovative version of Load Runner that had multiplayer functions where you could work cooperatively or against the other players. In fact, let me just read from this Wikipedia entry. In survival, the last remaining player wins. In escape mode, the first person to collect the secret gold, unlock the ladder, and escape wins. In tag match, players form teams and attempt to trap the members of the other team. So yes, cooperatively and competitively, Battle Load Runner offers both of those functions. But for the purpose of this video, I am just showing you the basic exploration levels where you have to get all of the gold in the level and get out of the level. There's no timer. You can solve it any way you want, take as long as you want, but you have to collect all the gold in the level in order for the secret ladder to appear that will lead you out of the game. Which, to to my memory, is consistent across all versions of Lode Runner I played as a kid. Apple II, Commodore 64, VIC-20, etc., etc. Not all of them had all of the levels, not all of them had a level editor, but all of them had this very simple premise: collect the gold, avoid the enemies, escape. Now, one of the ways that you can survive in this game is by digging holes which will trap the enemies that are chasing you. Now, if you're standing on a steel block like just was there, you can't dig through those. But if you're standing on bricks, you can dig holes and the enemies fall into it. They will get out of the holes given enough time, but if you dig multiple holes, they'll get out of one and fall right into the next one, and eventually the holes fill back in and they'll die. Or if you dig a hole way before they get there and they fall into it and it's just about to fill up, they die. They regenerate, of course. They drop down from the top of the screen back into the playfield, and there is a certain adaptive play style you can use based on them falling back into the playfield, because they move in patterns based on where you are in the level. They will traverse the ladders and the ropes to get to you based on where you are. So you can kind of lead them along, and you can lead them into traps and set those traps so that they are cleared out of the way. They can also pick up the gold as they traverse through the levels, so sometimes you can use that to your advantage by having them pick up the gold, digging a trap for them, and then waiting until they fall into the trap to collect that gold. There is a wide variety of ways to play a Lode Runner, whether it's Battle Lode Runner on PC Engine, or the original computer versions, or even the NES port that exists for the game. It's just a marvel of strategic puzzle playing arcade fun action. I don't think this ever would have been an arcade, but I would say it's got that franticness of an arcade game where you would want to keep pumping quarters into it to keep going, because you'd be unsatisfied if you almost completed a level, made a mistake, and died, and you'd be like, no, you'd pump another quarter in to get right back into the action and keep playing. So kind of surprising that it never made it to arcades. I would have tried to port it if I was Broderbund, which was the publisher of the game. The designer of the game, famously, is Doug Smith. He originally was making a port of Donkey Kong for a VAX computer, VAX terminals, and later tried to port it to Apple II, coding it all in assembly in one weekend. His first version of it, which was called Miner at the time, was rejected, and he retooled it, added some animated graphics and some more levels, and renamed it Lode Runner. And then he submitted it to 4 publishers, including Broderbund, and got 4 letters telling him they wanted to publish his game. But he went with Broderbund because that was the one that he first expressed interest in publishing with. So it is a very historically important game, and also a very popular series in Japan, which has had far more ports than any versions in North America to consoles. We've got a lot of PC ports of Lode Runner, but in Japan they've got even more home console ports, and maybe I'll cover those in the future, but for now, Mr. MegaManFan signing out. Welcome back to the PC Engine Files. I'm your host, Mr. MegaManFan, and in the spirit of the month of Halloween, I decided to look at a spooky game called Ghost Manor. But the only things that are really scary about this game is how difficult it is to play and how much it costs to own. If you want a copy of Ghost Manor, which, quite frankly, I'm skipping ahead by saying this, but I don't think you do, but if you do, you're not getting it for anything less than $75 loose and $155 complete. And why is that? Well, this is a late release for North America. It came out in 1992. It is very difficult to source information accurately because when you look up Ghost Manor video game, you get the Zonix cartridge for Atari 2600. So it's already difficult to find out anything about it, and it was even difficult to pick it up back in its heyday, given that by this point in the TurboGrafx 16's lineup, they were under Turbo Technologies Incorporated, which was a last-ditch effort of NEC and Hudson Soft to make any kind of headway in the market by creating a new company and using it to publish the games themselves that other software companies saw no reason to publish here. So we're talking diminishing returns all around. Small number of consoles owned, small number of games released for it, small number of games being sold, and thus the prices for late TurboGrafx games go up astronomically. The later, the more expensive they are. And we're getting into that rarefied air here, so it's safe to say this is no Bonk's adventure, and I don't just mean in terms of price or availability, but as a platforming game in general. Now, Bonk may not have the tightest controls in the world compared to a Mario game, but they are absolutely rock solid compared to Ghost Manor. You just slip and slide all over the place trying to control your hero Arthur, and they give you incredibly tiny platforms to land on, which is something that you don't need when you're already skidding around like you're on ice. And that just makes it a very frustrating experience. It's horrifying to play, but not in the way they intended it to be. And the music, well, it starts out being okay, but then after you get stuck in a level like this for more than a few minutes and you hear that same looping soundtrack over and over again with no variation, it quickly becomes grating. It makes you want to mute the volume and not listen to it at all. So be thankful that for voiceover, I've turned it way down so you can hear me, because I don't want to hear it anymore myself after playing this game. And there's something just cheesy in a very unpolished way about this game. Cheesy horror movies are great. I love movies like Evil Dead, and Bruce Campbell is a fantastic actor because he's so over the top. Shop smart, shop S-smart. You know, there's nothing wrong with cheese. It just has to be fun. If it's cheesy and it's not fun, then it just stinks. It's Limburger. It smells bad. It is bad. It's just not anything you want. You want cheese that's good cheese. You want cheese you can enjoy. And this does not provide that. There is a section here with these platforms that force you to slide down, and if you hammer the jump button enough times, you can sort of make progress up them. So it defies explanation why they were designed that way. It's like either you can climb them or you can't. Why can't you just go up them? Why do you have to slide down them if you can hammer the jump button enough times to get back up them? That's not much of a physics engine for this platformer at all. It says, we intended you to slide down, but you can cheese it if you want to. There's that word again. You can cheese a lot of things in this game, but you can't cheese that this orb you're given that you're supposed to defend yourself with has very limited ammo. And you don't realize that right away until it's gone, and then you have to die to get it back. I wasn't trying to die on purpose there, but I did. And again, I wasn't trying to die on purpose there either. I was just trying to collect the items. But if you jump into the flame, it kills you, even though you can walk in front of the flame, and it doesn't. And I tried to get up to the next area while I had cooled down the flames by picking up the blue item, but that didn't work. You can't, it's timed. Like in the King of Cards expansion for Shovel Knight, you can cool the flames for a certain amount of time, but they come back. At least in that game, it makes sense because you can do the dash to cool it down again, but once you pick up this item, you can't pick up another item to cool it down again. The item's gone, the flames are back, and you're screwed. And I'm screwed here too because I've got a key in my inventory and I'm standing in front of a door, but no matter what I do, I can't enter the door. I'm hitting the 1 button, the 2 button, the pause button, I'm hitting up in the button, I'm hitting down in the button. What's the point of having a key if it doesn't unlock the door? This game is obtuse in its ability to direct you where you should go. You fall into this chasm and you collect a key and you think, great, now I can leave this area. But no, that's not how you do it. It's unbelievable that they make you do this, but you have to hitch a ride on a ghost. You wouldn't think that's the way to solve this puzzle, right? Ghosts are ephemeral, they're transparent, they're insubstantial. How could you stand on a ghost? And yet, that is the only way to successfully leave this area, is if you see the ghost floating up, you catch a ride on it by jumping on top of the ghost, and he carries you back to the upper world, which in and of itself sounds good, but then it becomes obvious that one false step drags you right back down here again to this pit full of man-eating sharks and fire that you can walk in front of and be safe, but try to jump over it and you're good as dead. You've got monsters that pop out of barrels, lava that falls from the ceilings. In the words of an old song, 6 million ways to die, choose one. Let me tell you though, choose something else for Halloween. I know it's the season, I know it's the reason, but you can play Splatterhouse, or you can play Rondo of Blood. You can play something much more fun than this slippery, unpolished, late-era TurboGrafx release. It's a North American exclusive. It was developed here and published here, and the Japanese are probably grateful for that. They're like, thank you for never unleashing this turd on our shores. We are very fortunate to have not had this game on PC Engine. Maybe somebody somewhere is saying, I want this game because I want every game, whether it was PC Engine or TurboGrafx 16, and they're collecting all of the North American exclusives. Good luck. I mean, you can get a copy of this if you want, but I don't recommend it. Not for the price, not for the playability, not for the fact that it's going to be very difficult to get it complete in box if that's the kind of thing you want to do. It's just bad, as Rerez would say. So big shout out to Shane and his channel, and no love to this game because, look, that looked like a perfectly safe spot to walk, and it just dropped me right back down again. I hate this game. I hate that it exists, but happy Halloween. We'll try to do more of these games for the rest of the month. Welcome back to the PC Engine Files. I'm your host, Mr. MegaManFan, and since it is the spooky month, it is October, we are trying to do Halloween-themed games, and this may seem an unusual entry, but it does have the word ghost in the title, and it's more apt than you might think. But first, we need to talk about the backstory for this game, because way back on PC Engine Files episode number 8, I looked at a game called Genpei Tomoden, also known as the Genji and Heike clans, when it was localized for the United States. When I say it was localized, though, I don't mean it came out for the TurboGrafx 16. No, Genpei Tomoden stayed a Japan region exclusive of the PC Engine, but it did eventually come to Namco Arcade Classics Volume 4 on the PlayStation, which was where I first got to experience the game before I reviewed it for the PC Engine Files. This sequel, Genpei Tomoden Kanoni, is one that got localized as Samurai Ghost, and humorously, the name is actually fairly accurate in translation because you're controlling a undead samurai named Taira no Kagekyo, or Kagekyo for short. The first game featured what I can only describe as the Japanese equivalent of Hell, an underworld featuring the Sanzu River, a place that the Buddhists in Japan believe to separate the present and the afterlife, and he even battled mythological characters like Emma-O, the god of the underworld, and the sun goddess Amaterasu. I probably didn't pronounce that right, but I'm just a gaijin from the United States, so doing the best I can. But Genpei Tomoden had a crossover between historical fact and straight-up fiction. It resurrected a character who fell at the end of the Genpei War, hence Genpei Tomoden, but then it became a completely fantastical game where you battled all these demons and skeletons and basically the same things you see in Samurai Ghost. Although this game is a little infamous among fans of the first game because certain things that made the first game a classic were removed. That first game had 3 different modes, which are known colloquially as small mode, big mode, and plain mode. Small mode is your standard side-scrolling beat 'em up. The big mode has large characters and boss fights, and the plain mode is a top-down perspective like The Legend of Zelda. Guess what? There's no plain mode in the sequel. None. No top-down sections at all. You cannot do it. It doesn't exist. That made people very annoyed with the sequel. And there's no small mode either. There's just big mode all the time. You have to deal with these side-scrolling sections and hordes of enemies that surround you on both sides. And it's frustrating because you're all the way to the left side of the screen, so when things come at you from behind, you have very little time to react. And these platforming sections are also very frustrating because the gigantic sized sprites don't allow you to move very fluidly from one thing to the next. It's kind of jerky, and you'll notice when you try to turn around, the screen scroll, because you're all the way over to the left, is pretty ridiculous. It has to shift the entire camera all the way to one side and then all the way to the other side. I'm not saying it's unplayable or bad. I'm just saying that if you're a fan of the original game and you like the variety of the game, then the sequel takes all that variety out and leaves you with only the most frustrating part. There are power-ups, and I wish I had some better concept of how to use them. I've read several reviews that say there are sword power-ups, but I don't seem to either be finding them or getting any use out of them. Maybe the run button activates them, but all it seems to do is pause. I can't figure out a button combo that would unleash anything. All I can do is run and jump and swing the sword. And the thing that really irritates me is when enemies are overhead, you have to jump and start swinging your sword almost immediately because you have such a slow draw on the sword, particularly in the big mode, which again is the only mode you can play in Samurai Ghost. It takes forever for your sword to reach the hitbox of the enemy. So if you don't jump and start swinging immediately, then by the time they get to you and you want to swing the sword, you're already going to take a hit. I know it sounds like I'm straight up dogging this game. Apologies to the skeleton dogs, don't mean to offend them. It's just not easy to play. It's not something I wouldn't play, but it has, as one reviewer put it, a very steep learning curve. Getting the timing down on your sword is very important. Learning how to jump and maneuver from one large obstacle to the next is very important. The number of hits you have in your life bar seems somewhat plentiful, represented by the candles, and they usually only go down half a candle when you get hit, but it's deceptive because you have very big sprites on the screen, so you get hit a lot. Your hitbox is huge, enemies are hard to avoid, and those candles just start burning out very fast. Your life gets literally snuffed out. So, well, if you wanted to play a spooky game, it's definitely got the underworld, the undead, the skeletons, the demons, the resurrected samurai straight from the underworld. It's fitting for Halloween, even with a seemingly absurd title that sounds like some sort of crossover between a trauma movie and a NES game like Zombie Nation. And now that I say that, I realize it's actually quite appropriate because Zombie Nation a game localized from Japan that was originally called Abenarobu Tengu, featured the floating head of a samurai named Namakubi. Why they thought that would translate well into the US market, I don't know, but they actually tried and they renamed it Zombie Nation. I guess if you're a headless floating samurai, you're a zombie because you're undead. And this guy is undead, so it all ties together quite nicely, I guess, but certainly wasn't intending it when I made the reference. It's just, there's a very, very Japanese aesthetic to the game. I believe I said that about the original Genpei Tomoden. It is certainly true of the sequel, so you need to approach it with that mindset and not necessarily play it with a Western frame of mind. The difficulty, put that aside for the moment, but just allow yourself to get steeped in the mythology and the history which the games draw from, and understand that the look, the style, the feel draws on those Japanese cultural aesthetics and creates an environment that will feel very foreign to players of this game. But if you embrace it, get into it, and take it for what it is definitely a culturally unique game that I'm amazed it actually got localized. I would not have expected it, but I believe Turbo Technologies Incorporated was somewhat desperate by 1992 for anything they could get their hands on. In their desperation to support the TurboGrafx 16 and Turbo Duo in the North American market, I think they rushed it because the localization is pretty bad. The phrase, "how a pity you are," doesn't make grammatical sense in any way, shape, or form. If it was, "what a pity, try again," or "you're pitiful, you died," or "what a pity, you are dead." Sure, any of those would make sense, but "how a pity you are" is one of those classics of Japanese to English mistranslation where something clearly got lost along the way and they just tried to convert it word for word instead of getting the actual meaning in the context of the words. So maybe it's literally those words, but it is not the meaning of those words at all. And yet, it adds a charm to games like Samurai Ghost. You wouldn't want it to be perfect if you're nostalgic for things like this. You would actually remember how a pity you are because it's so absurd. It's better that way. It's wrong, but it's better. Samurai Ghost is a game that I feel like you should try, and especially during the Halloween season, enjoy, because despite its overwhelmingly Japanese cultural aesthetic, if you think of it as an undead samurai battling his way through hell, then it is very much a game in the spirit of the Halloween season. Nothing you see here would be too terribly out of place for Halloween. Undead dogs, those would be in a Tim Burton movie. Spooky, scary skeletons, those would be on people's front lawns for the Halloween season. Skeletons brandishing swords and attacking you, that's probably a very Legend of Zelda thing, even though they removed the Legend of Zelda top-down sections. So there is a lot to be appreciated in a month like October for a game like Samurai Ghost. I would give it a shot. I wouldn't necessarily buy it because it is a stupidly expensive game, as most late releases for TurboGrafx 16 are. You cannot find any of them under $50, not in my experience anyway. This one is no exception. Loose, $69, complete, $200, brand new, if that's even feasible in 2020, $300. The manual alone goes for $10 and the box alone goes for $175, so that should give you some idea of what we're dealing with here. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.